I want you to pause for a moment and think back to a time in your life when you had just emerged from a very dark chapter. Maybe it was after a divorce. Maybe it came after a deep loss. Or perhaps it followed years of quiet exhaustion when you were barely holding on and no one seemed to notice. And then something shifted. It could have been a book you read, a meditation retreat, a trip, or even just a sudden moment of clarity. Something cracked open, and you began the journey of healing. You started sleeping better. You felt a little more at peace. You learned to say no without guilt. And slowly, you became a lighter, clearer version of yourself. But then something strange happened. People you thought were close, people who used to be warm, started acting differently. They grew cold. They made sarcastic jokes about your new habits. Meditating? What's wrong with you? Or, are you having some kind of spiritual meltdown? And the strangest part, you weren't doing anything wrong. You were simply getting better. Why does that happen? Over the years, I've sat with countless people, Buddhist practitioners, therapy clients, fellow travelers on the path of awakening, and heard the same story. I thought once I got better, people would be happy for me. But the more I healed, the more they pulled away. One woman once told me through tears, "I left a toxic relationship, learned to love myself, started eating plant-based, and meditating. But my best friend of 15 years just stopped calling. When I reached out, she brushed me off. When I told her I finally felt at peace, she smirked and said, 'Let's see how long that lasts.' Have you ever felt that? That moment when you step into your light, and the people you hoped would clap for you quietly turn their backs? I understand. And I want you to understand something too. Your light reveals the shadows in others. When you begin living more consciously, it forces others to see how unconsciously they've been living. When you set healthy boundaries, they realize they can no longer control or rely on your old patterns. When you forgive and let go, it threatens their grip on resentment. It's not that you've done anything wrong, it's that you're no longer the easier version of yourself they were comfortable with. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "The wise are like an island amidst the current, untouched by the flowing stream. When one shines, darkness cannot hide." Your inner light built through meditation, mindfulness, and simple daily choices toward peace is unsettling to those who haven't yet faced their own darkness. They may not know how to name it. They may think they're mocking you, but deep down, it's their own discomfort speaking, not your failure. I want you to imagine this, a room that's been dark for years. When you turn the light on, you see the dust. But the light didn't create the dust, it only revealed it. You, in your healing, are that light. And not everyone is ready to see clearly. You might be called arrogant, distant, or not who you used to be. But they don't see the nights you cried alone. They don't know how hard you worked just to feel normal again. They only see the new you brighter, freer, and it unsettles their sense of control. The sad truth is, some people only loved the version of you that was broken because your brokenness made them feel needed. Your confusion made them feel wise. Your dependence gave them importance. But when you say, "I'm okay now," they don't know who they are without your pain. Now, I'm not saying you have to cut these people out, but I am saying this. See them clearly. They're not betraying you. They're betraying the old image of you, the one you've already outgrown. And that's not your fault. After more than 30 years walking beside people on this journey, here's what I've learned. Healing doesn't just mean losing your pain. It might also mean losing the people who were attached to that pain. But you must be brave. Do not shrink back into your old shadows just to keep the peace. If someone only feels safe when you're small, then that is not peace. It's quiet oppression. Jesus once said, "No one lights a lamp and hides it under the bed. They place it high so it gives light to the whole house. The Buddha taught, "A bright mind is a precious treasure. Don't let others dim it, just because they haven't yet learned how to light their own. You don't have to apologize for your peace. You don't have to dim your light to make others feel comfortable. And you are not alone. There are so many others walking this path too. If someone drifts away while you are healing, be grateful. Because light doesn't chase people away, it only reveals who was truly walking with you. And you, my friend, please keep shining. Because the world doesn't need more people bending down to be accepted. The world needs you, the real, awakened, luminous you." I want you to try and remember the last time you sat with someone, maybe a relative, maybe an old friend, and in a rare, honest moment, you shared something deeply personal. Maybe it was a story about your meditation practice, or a moment of stillness during prayer, or how you felt an unexplainable peace after a spiritual experience. But then, you noticed something shift. They blinked more than usual, let out a sigh, or quickly changed the subject. They didn't say anything directly, but you could feel it. They weren't comfortable with the light that had just been lit inside your story. Have you ever felt that? I have. And I've heard many others describe the exact same thing. One woman once told me, "I just mentioned to my friend that meditation helped me sleep better. She cut me off, rolled her eyes, and joked, 'Here we go again.' You know, some people don't hate you. They just can't stand the part of you that makes them confront the part of themselves they haven't brought into the light yet." There's a gentle but profound truth I often repeat in my Dharma talks here in the U.S., especially with older adults, those who've walked through many seasons of life. Light doesn't cause pain, but it does reveal the unhealed places in others. And that can make them uncomfortable. When you start living with faith, when you speak of compassion, forgiveness, or simply try to live more kindly, some people turn away. They don't want to hear about God or the Buddha or any path that leads toward truth. It's not because they don't understand, it's because they don't want to understand. They're not reacting to your words. They're reacting to the energy behind your words. I remember one evening at the monastery, a Buddhist practitioner who was also a retired psychologist came to me and asked, "Why is it that whenever I share anything about my spiritual journey, my old friends look at me differently? They say I've become self-righteous or too extreme. But I'm just trying to live more peacefully." I looked at her and said, "Because your light is changing the frequency in the room, and not everyone is ready to sit in the light." The Buddha once said, "The light of a single lamp can light thousands of others without being diminished." But do you know what happens sometimes? When that light touches someone, they don't open to receive it. They close their eyes and complain that it's too bright. It's like opening a window in the morning. If someone is already awake, the light feels gentle. But if they're still asleep, they'll turn away, close the curtains, maybe even get annoyed. The mind is no different. Light isn't just religion. It's truth. It's awareness. It's unconditional love. And there are souls, people who may stand right next to you, who still choose to live in their own dark caves. In those caves, they've made peace with their doubts, their unhealed wounds, and the limiting beliefs they aren't ready to let go of. So when you, someone they once knew, suddenly begin speaking about karma, surrender, grace, scripture, the Buddha, or God, they feel threatened. And you need to understand, they're not fighting you. They're fighting the part of themselves they're not yet ready to face. Modern science backs this up. Studies show that when people hear something that triggers deep, unresolved emotion, the nervous system reacts as if it's under attack. They don't know why, they just feel uncomfortable. And to protect themselves, they might label you too intense, too spiritual, too much. But hear me clearly, and I say this with love. Do not shrink yourself just because your light makes others uneasy. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove anything. You don't even need to convince anyone. Just live your truth gently, clearly, honestly. And your light, by its nature, will guide those who are ready. For those who aren't ready, let them walk at their own pace. Because everyone arrives at the light in their own time. Some come through loss, some through despair, some only after trying everything else and finding no peace. And maybe, just maybe, you are the one who plants the seed, whether they realize it or not. So the next time someone pulls away when you mention the Buddha, or awkwardly smiles when you talk about healing, don't get upset. Don't try to explain. Just smile. Because you know, real light doesn't need defending. It only needs to keep shining. You don't have to hide your light to make others feel safe. Just continue to be who you are fully, peacefully, and without regret. And if today you feel alone because of your light, know this: there are many of us out here walking the same path. We may not sit at the same table, but we are walking the same road of awakening. And that road has never been lonely. I want you to pause for just a moment and answer this honestly to yourself. When was the last time you truly felt like you? Not the version of you that smiles politely to keep the peace. Not the version that bites your tongue just to avoid conflict. But the real you living in alignment with your feelings, your values, not apologizing for simply being who you are. Do you remember? An older Buddhist student once sat in front of me during a community gathering, and with tears in her eyes, said, "Master, I don't recognize myself anymore. At this age, I'm still trying to be the version of me that makes others feel comfortable. I keep compromising, staying quiet, doing everything they need, and in the end, I feel like the loneliest person in my own life." And my heart ached hearing that, not because it was rare, but because it's so common. I've seen so many kind, gentle, compassionate people, especially in their later years, slowly lose their voice. Not because they don't know what they want, but because they're afraid that speaking it out loud might push someone away. Have you ever felt that way? Losing your voice, not because you don't have clarity, but because you fear being called selfish. Losing your boundaries, not from weakness, but from the desire to keep everything peaceful. And over time, you start to shrink. You second-guess your truths. You hesitate to say no. You start saying, "I'm sorry," even when you've done nothing wrong. That's how we begin to lose ourselves. I want you to picture this. You are a flame warm, alive, full of light that can warm not only yourself, but others too. But if every day you dim that flame, hide it, turn it down, just because others find it too bright, too warm, too unfamiliar, eventually that flame will fade. Not because it's weak, but because it can't breathe anymore. The Buddha once taught, "The mind is the source of all things." If your mind is not clear, then no matter how gentle your words are, they're not true. When you live disconnected from yourself, you might still seem polite, calm, even kind on the outside. But inside, something begins to empty out. You laugh less. You dream less. You feel like you're playing a role, instead of actually living your life. I once asked a group of Buddhist practitioners during a meditation class, if no one expected anything from you, what would you do differently today? A retired man in his 60s sat quietly for a while, then said, "I'd stop going to dinners I don't want to attend. I'd finally take that painting class I've always loved, but my wife says it's childish. And I'd stop forcing a smile when people mock the things I believe in." His words struck a deep chord because they were real. And they hurt. You see, Most people won't ask you outright to change. They won't say, "Stop being yourself." Instead, they'll sigh when you do something you love. They'll chuckle when you talk about your dreams. They'll tell you, "Don't take things so seriously," whenever you express something from the heart. And little by little, you begin to shrink. Not because they're stronger, but because you value peace more than your own truth. I understand that. I've been there too. But here's what I've learned. Peace that comes at the cost of who you are isn't peace. It's surrender. And you weren't born to surrender. You were born to explore, to feel, to walk through life with an open heart, not a polite mask. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful concept, taking refuge in oneself. It means turning inward for strength, not isolating yourself, but learning to listen to your own heart before trying to please the world. It's about walking the path your soul whispers to you, even if it's unusual, unpopular, or unseen. You're not selfish for choosing authenticity. You're not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You're not too sensitive if your heart tells you, "This doesn't feel like me anymore." You're just growing. You're returning home. So if you feel like you're drifting away from yourself, stop, gently, like a true friend, and ask, "Who am I trying to please right now?" And more importantly, is this version of peace worth losing myself? You don't need to shout to be you. You just need to stop nodding when your heart is saying no. You just need to stop smiling when your soul is aching. And remember, the world doesn't need another copy of someone else. It needs you real, radiant, alive. Because your fire, just as it is, can light the way for others to return to themselves too. Hold on to that flame, because you deserve to live in the warmth of your own truth. I want you to sit down for a moment and really think about this question. Who are the people that only seem to love you when you're broken? Maybe it's an old friend. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's someone who's always there when you're down but goes quiet, or even cold when you start to rise. Have you ever met someone like that? A Buddhist student once sat across from me and shared with a sad, reflective look, "Master, I've just come out of a really dark chapter. I struggled with depression, with long-lasting wounds. But then I found meditation. I learned to let go. And I slowly started finding myself again. And strangely, my best friend isn't really close anymore. I thought she'd be happy for me. But instead, she became distant, even sarcastic, like I had somehow betrayed our friendship. I paused and asked her gently, "Was she there for you when you were suffering?" She nodded. Yes, she was very caring, always listening. She'd say, "You've got me. I'm here for you." And I said softly, "Maybe she didn't love you. Maybe she only loved the version of you that was hurting." You see what I mean? Some people only feel secure when you're beneath them, when you still need them, when you're down and they get to rescue you. When you're struggling, they're the first to show up. But the moment you start to walk tall again, when you begin to heal, to not need saving, they quietly disappear. Not because you've changed, but because they no longer feel powerful around you. And here's the thing, they're not necessarily bad people. Most of the time, they don't even realize they're doing it. But their love was built on imbalance, where you were the wounded and they were the strong. You needed, they gave. You cried, they comforted. But once you stood up, they lost their footing because that invisible power dynamic vanished. I want you to imagine this. You're a young tree. Storms knocked you over more than once. And someone came and propped you up. You're grateful. But over time, your roots deepened. You grew stronger, more alive, more independent. And now, that person steps away. They say, "This tree doesn't need me anymore." They grow distant, maybe resentful, because they never loved the tree. They loved who they got to be next to it. And if you're not careful, you'll start bending yourself back down just to keep them beside you. I've seen this happen so often in families. A mother gets used to her daughter being fragile, constantly needing advice, always calling home. But then the daughter grows up, makes her own choices, lives independently, and the mother feels left behind. Small tensions begin to build, but underneath it all is a deep fear of losing control. Or friendships where someone has always been your emotional pillar, the go-to for advice, the comforter, the rescuer. And when you stop seeking that role, when you find clarity, peace, and your own strength, they suddenly feel lost, like they don't know who they are in your life anymore. This story is incredibly common, especially for those of us in midlife or beyond. Because when we start to mature spiritually, we stop needing to be rescued. We stop complaining like we used to. We stop needing constant validation. We begin to feel whole. And that wholeness, it reveals something powerful. Who truly loves you and who only loved your brokenness. The Buddha once said, "A wise person helps others rise, then lets them walk on their own, without clinging, without control." But many people, they're more attached to their role in your life than to the actual relationship. And once that role disappears, so does their affection. You don't have to be angry, but you do have to see it clearly. Because if you don't, you may unconsciously shrink back into the weaker version of yourself, just to be accepted. You'll stop sharing your good news for fear of being mocked. You'll downplay your healing just to keep them close. And eventually, you'll start dimming your own light. That's not love. That's soul compromise. So ask yourself, if I become radiant, joyful, confident, who will still be here? Who will clap for me when I shine, instead of going quiet or walking away? Who will walk beside me, even if I no longer need them to save me? That is your true people. The rest, you can let go with gratitude. Gratitude that they were once there to lift you. Gratitude that they showed you you don't have to stay small to be loved. And gratitude for the lesson that may take a lifetime to learn. Real love doesn't need you to break to prove it exists. Real love celebrates your rise. It smiles and steps aside without needing the spotlight. So if today you're healing, you're stronger, you're shining brighter, and someone starts to disappear, let them. You don't owe anyone the older version of you. You only have one responsibility now, to keep becoming who you truly are, free, clear, and full of compassion, as you were always meant to be. I want you to imagine this with me. You wake up on a quiet morning. Sunlight slips through the window. Your heart feels light as a cloud. There's this gentle clarity in you. Like, today is the day you could do anything, call an old friend, finish something you've been putting off, or simply enjoy a warm cup of tea in peaceful silence. But then, you get a phone call, or you stop by someone's house. And after the conversation, though, nothing dramatic happened. You feel drained. No arguments, no insults, just this strange emptiness inside you. Your peace feels like it got pulled away. Your faith feels a little dimmer. Have you ever felt that? I've met hundreds of people who've told me this same story, even though their situations were all different. They say, "I don't know why, but every time I see this person, I walk away feeling empty." Or, "It takes me a whole day to recover my energy after just 1 hour with them." You know what? That's not random. That's spiritual. Your energy, that sense of presence, aliveness, awareness in you, that's one of your most precious treasures. It's not in your bank account, your age, or your reputation. It's in how fully you show up. It's in your breath, your gaze, the way you walk into life with calm and presence. And not everyone is meant to have access to that. One Buddhist student once shared with me, "Master, I used to think I had to be kind to everyone. But I started noticing, no matter how kind I was to some people, I always left those interactions feeling off. Why is that?" I looked at her, smiled, and said gently, "Because you confused compassion with being unguarded. Compassion means you carry love in your heart without hatred. Being unguarded means you let people walk into your spiritual space with no boundaries at all. You can have an open heart and still know when to close the door." Energy, according to the Buddha, isn't just something invisible that floats by. It's the vibration of your mind, the imprint of presence. Every interaction leaves a trace. We don't just exchange stories or words, we exchange energy. And some people, they don't come to give anything. They only come to take. I want you to picture this. You are a cup. Every morning, you fill yourself with meditation, with prayer, with nature, with silence. But certain people, they don't just sip from your cup. They drain it and leave without a single thank you. And if you don't notice it, you'll spend your whole life just refilling your cup for someone else to empty again. But you need water too. You need to keep some of it, to nourish your dreams, to revive your joy, to water the roots of your own awakening. So don't be surprised if some people make you feel brighter and some leave you feeling dim. It's not that you're too sensitive. It's that your energy doesn't resonate with theirs. Some people don't come to share light. They come to absorb it. They speak softly, but their presence leaves a heavy echo. They don't yell, but somehow you always walk away from them feeling small, uncertain, or confused. And you have the right to protect yourself. One thing I always tell my older meditation students is this: protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's spiritual ethics. Because only when your energy is protected can you offer something truly good to others, and offer it sustainably. You can't heal others if you're constantly exhausted. You can't share hope if you always need recovery time after a conversation. You can't open your heart if every time you do, it gets emptied out. After decades of working with people, from CEOs to single mothers, retired veterans to those lost in midlife, I've learned one thing: keep close the people who make you feel more alive, and keep a gentle distance from those who make you feel less like yourself. Because you matter, not only when you're useful, not only when you're endlessly available, but simply because your inner space is sacred, and not everyone deserves to walk into it. You don't need to shut your heart, but you do need to notice who's coming to you with love and who's just trying to fill the emptiness inside them with your light. So next time you feel empty after seeing someone, don't blame yourself. Ask gently, am I letting someone use my energy without receiving any real support in return? Am I trading my peace just to keep a connection alive? Does this person bring out the radiant me, or leave me with more healing to do after every encounter? When you answer these questions with honesty, you'll start to see awakening isn't about understanding more. It's about recognizing what no longer belongs. Guard your energy like a sacred flame. Only share it with those who carry light too. You were not born to be drained. You were born to shine. Consciously, fully, and joyfully. I want you to sit with me for a moment and think back to a time when you walked into a room. Maybe it was a small gathering, a casual visit, or even just stepping into someone's home. Nothing bad happened. No one was rude. No conflict. People smiled. Conversations were polite. But something inside you didn't feel right. Your heart started beating a little faster. Your breathing got shallow. And your mind, suddenly spinning, felt flooded with thoughts, like 100 tabs open all at once. You tried to stay present, to act normal. But inside, all you wanted was to leave. Have you ever felt that? If you have, let me say this to you clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not overthinking. And it's not just anxiety. It might be your soul trying to warn you. One afternoon during a meditation class, a Buddhist student shared with me, "Every time I visit this certain relative, I feel like there's a fog in my head. I don't hate them. They haven't done anything wrong. But when I'm around them, I just feel disconnected from myself." I looked at her gently and said, "Because your soul saw something that your mind hasn't caught up with yet." You see, in Buddhism, there's a principle called spiritual mindfulness. It's not just being aware of your emotions. It's being aware of the subtle energy your heart is picking up. Some people, without saying a word, create spiritual static, an anxious frequency, an energy that doesn't match your vibration. And if you're quiet enough, still enough, you can feel it. As clearly as stepping from an air-conditioned room into the blazing Sunday. I want you to imagine this. You are a tuning fork. Every person you meet sends out a signal. Some make you feel warm, steady, and at ease. Others make your body tense up, like your system is bracing to protect itself. Even if they've done nothing wrong. And you don't need a reason to trust that feeling. You just need to believe in the wisdom of your own body and mind. Modern science is just beginning to confirm what the Buddha taught thousands of years ago. Your body picks up on energetic environments long before your conscious mind does. Your nervous system, especially the vagus nerve, can hear the signals in the space around you. When something's off, it activates survival mode. Racing heart, mental fog, uneasiness. That's not random. That's your inner alarm system going off. Someone may seem kind, gentle, even soft-spoken. But if their energy is holding unspoken resentment, unacknowledged jealousy, or hidden manipulation dressed up as friendliness, your soul will sense it. Even if your logic is still trying to explain it away, you may not hear a clear message, but you'll feel exhausted after being near them. You'll second-guess yourself. You'll find yourself needing to recenter after every interaction. And you won't know why. Let me tell you, not knowing why doesn't mean there's nothing there. Sometimes, intuition is the soul's language. Not through words, but through feeling. And if you keep ignoring that, you're not just losing energy. You're losing yourself. The Buddha didn't tell us to be suspicious of everyone, but he did teach the power of awareness, especially in recognizing when we're stepping into an unwholesome environment, even if it looks soft and polite on the surface. I once told a student, if you walk into a temple and feel at peace, that's a good sign. But if you walk into any space, even family, and feel like you can't breathe fully, that's something to pay attention to. So if you sit next to someone and feel an unspoken anxiety, trust that. If your heart races, if your mind feels scrambled, listen to your body. This is not judging others. This is being honest with yourself. You don't need to shout, "I don't vibe with you." You don't need to argue or explain. You just need to take a step back, gently, clearly, and ask yourself, do I feel peaceful around this person? Can I be myself? Or do I have to brace and perform? Am I healing or am I constantly defending? The answer won't come through words. It'll come from a quiet feeling in your chest. You don't owe anyone your presence if being present with them costs you your awareness. Stay close to those who help you settle, not those who keep you spinning. Stay close to those who help you open, not those who make you shrink. Stay close to those who bring you back to yourself, not those who pull you into confusion trying to understand them. That's not selfish. That's wisdom. And it's how you protect your spiritual well-being. In a world full of noise, but starving for deep listening, your soul knows the way. You just have to get quiet and listen. I want you to pause with me for just a moment. Take a deep breath and think back to a relationship in your life. One where you didn't feel bound by love, but by something harder to name, guilt. Maybe someone once said to you, "I did everything for you, and this is how you repay me?" Or, "If it weren't for me, do you really think you'd be where you are today?" They didn't have to raise their voice, but those words, they echo in your chest. Every time you want to walk away, every time you want to live differently, every time you want to say no. Have you ever felt that? A Buddhist woman once shared her story with me. She had spent over 30 years in an unhappy marriage, not because she feared being alone, not because she couldn't survive on her own, but because every time she thought of letting go, her husband would remind her of all the things he had done for her. The hard years, the times he stayed by her side when she was sick, the sacrifices. He would say, "If it weren't for me, you'd have no one." And she said to me, "I don't even know if I love him anymore. But every time I try to leave, I feel guilty." I looked at her gently and said, "No one should stay in a relationship out of guilt. True love stays because it cares, not because it owes." You see, there's a kind of emotional bond that gets mistaken for love. It's the bond of guilt. Someone says, "I sacrificed for you. I was there when no one else was." And they use that to keep you close. At first, you don't see it clearly, because your gratitude is real. You want to give back, but over time, you begin to lose your freedom. You start asking permission to change. You apologize for simply wanting something of your own. And slowly, you find yourself living in an invisible debt, a debt you can never fully repay. I want you to picture this. You're a bird. Someone once helped heal your broken wing. They took care of you, nurtured you, helped you fly again. But now, when your wings are strong and you're ready to soar, they say, "You owe me your life. If you leave now, you're ungrateful." And so, you stay in the cage, even though your heart is already up in the sky. Is that really love? The Buddha once taught, a truly compassionate person helps others walk the path of freedom, with no binding, no ownership, no expectation of repayment. True care doesn't hold you hostage to the past. It doesn't make you feel guilty for living in your truth. It doesn't wrap itself in phrases like, "After all I've done for you." I've met many people, men and women, who've lived most of their lives in a kind of love called obligation. They stayed with parents out of debt, not allowing themselves to live freely. Stayed in marriages because they once received help. Stayed in friendships because someone had supported them in a dark time, even if that relationship has since turned manipulative. But here's what I want you to know. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink to prove your gratitude. You can be thankful and free. You can appreciate someone and still say, "This is enough." You can carry deep gratitude without letting it trap you in guilt. Every time you try to grow, I want you to ask yourself, if I didn't feel guilty, would I still stay? If they never reminded me of what they did, would I still feel close to them? Am I here because I love them or because I don't want to feel like a bad person? And if that last question hits home, you might not be in a connection. You might be in a contract. You deserve more than that. You deserve love that lets you breathe, lets you be. Love that doesn't ask you to earn it by staying small. Love never comes with manipulation. Love doesn't need guilt to keep someone close. And if someone is using emotion to keep you trapped, to make you doubt your own worth, to pull you into their world out of fear of losing control, that's not love. That's control. That's ownership. That's power play. So say this gently to yourself. I am grateful to everyone who's ever helped me. But gratitude is not a chain. It's a pair of wings. And when the time comes, if your heart says it's time, walk away. Not with bitterness, not with blame, but with kindness and clarity. You don't owe anyone your entire life. You only owe one thing: to live truthfully, to live in light. Because you, living in your freedom, is the most sacred offering you can give this world. I'd like you to sit with me for a moment and think about someone in your life. Maybe an old friend, a close coworker, or even a family member. Someone you once trusted deeply. They were always kind, always gentle with their words, always there when you stumbled. But somehow, the closer you got to them, the smaller you felt, the more confused, and eventually, the more drained. Have you ever felt something like that? After a morning meditation, a Buddhist practitioner once shared with me, "Dear teacher, I had a friend I shared everything with. She always listened, always stood by me. But every time something good happened in my life, a small success, a little progress in my healing, she would grow quiet. She stopped celebrating with me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, until I realized she was only fully present when I was in pain. I looked at her and gently said, 'You're not wrong. Some people only feel comfortable when your light is dim, because when you begin to shine, your light casts shadows on the places inside them they haven't healed. That's a quiet truth. And a painful one, too. Not everyone wears their real face. Some enter your life wearing the mask of care, but beneath it is a need for control, a fear of being left behind, a jealousy they haven't learned how to face. Now, I'm not saying these people are evil or that they set out to harm you. But there are those who live unconsciously behind their masks because they haven't had the courage to face the emptiness within themselves. They can't be real with you because they're not yet real with themselves. I want you to imagine this. You're walking through a foggy forest. Someone is walking beside you, claiming they'll guide you. They hold the flashlight. They draw the map. They constantly check in on you. But every time you reach out to hold your own light, they say, "Don't worry, let me do it." And then one day, you realize the light isn't there to help you find your way. It's there so they can stay in control of the path. You can feel grateful for their company, but you also need to be awake enough to see they're not supporting your growth. They're quietly making sure you don't grow too far. In Buddhist teaching, there's a term called false companionship. Relationships that seem wholesome on the outside, but in reality, subtly hinder your inner freedom. These people might not ever do anything wrong. They might look like saints to the world. But you, the one inside that connection, feel yourself slowly losing the courage to dream big, to speak honestly, to live fully, because you're always afraid of upsetting them. The Buddha once said, "Your mind is your most precious treasure. Do not hand it to someone whose touch you cannot see clearly, whether it's a bare hand or a gloved one. Because some gloves are made of sweet words, of soft phrases like, "I just want what's best for you," of sad eyes when you don't follow their advice, of silence like a quiet punishment. Every time you make a choice they can't control. I once worked with a man in his 62nd. He told me, "For most of my life I followed the advice of a close friend, someone I believed always knew better. But over time I saw he never really listened to what I wanted. He always had an answer ready, always made me feel foolish for having a different view, and I realized I had spent nearly 30 years ignoring my own voice because I thought he knew best." Are you living that way? Are you listening to someone else so much that you've stopped listening to yourself? Are you in a relationship where you feel you have to shrink yourself just to keep the other person comfortable? Are you doubting your light because someone else doesn't feel at ease when you begin to shine? If so, then maybe it's time to look at the face across from you, not with anger, not to accuse, but to reclaim your own light. The light you've given away for too long to someone who used it only to keep their mask in place. You have the right to live in clarity. You have the right to ask, does this relationship help me shine or dim me down? And you have the right to walk away, not in bitterness, but in awareness. Sometimes we must gently remove our own masks first. The mask of endurance, the mask of misplaced loyalty, the mask of, "I have to keep them in my life." And when you do, you'll begin to see those who truly love you don't need to wear masks. They don't need to play the role of the one who understands you best. They don't need you to stay small so they can feel big. They celebrate when you rise. They applaud when you bloom. They walk beside you quietly, without needing to hold the wheel. And if today you're sensing that someone is no longer being real with you, don't rush to blame. Just take a step back, observe gently, and ask yourself, can I still be me in this relationship? Because your light, no matter how long it's been hidden, will eventually shine through. And when it does, the masks will fall. Only the truth will remain. And truth, however painful, is the only place where real freedom begins. I want you to sit with me for a moment and think of someone in your life, someone who always leaves you feeling drained after every interaction. They don't say anything cruel. They don't intentionally try to hurt you. But every time you're around them, it feels like something inside you gets pulled out. Your mind feels foggy. Your mood sinks, and you don't even know why. Have you ever felt that way? I've met many people who live with someone, a spouse, a parent, a child, even a dear friend, someone they genuinely love, but after every conversation or encounter, they say it takes them an entire day to recover. They tell me, "I love them so much, but being around them, it leaves my spirit completely worn out." And they always end with a guilty sigh. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. But you know what? Sometimes it's not because you're weak. It's because the pain that person carries is so heavy, and they've been unconsciously pouring it into you. An older Buddhist woman once shared with me, her voice trembling, "Venerable, I have a younger sister. Every time I see her, I feel completely emptied. She always talks about her suffering, about who hurt her, how unfair life is to her. At first, I thought she just needed someone to listen. But after a while, I started to lose sight of myself. I looked at her and gently said, sometimes unhealed pain looks for a place to settle. And often, that place is you." In Buddhist teachings, there's a powerful image used to describe unresolved suffering. A smoldering fire. It doesn't rage out in the open, but it burns quietly beneath the ashes. And when the wind blows, when someone gets close, when someone cares, that fire flares up again, not to destroy, but because it was never truly extinguished. There are many people in this world still living with old wounds. From childhood, from betrayal, from loss, from a life where love was scarce. And because they were never fully heard, never truly healed, they carry those wounds into every relationship they touch. They don't realize it. They don't know that every time they speak in bitterness, complain endlessly, or project their broken lens onto others, they are unknowingly placing that emotional weight on someone else's shoulders. I call this unconscious energy parasitism. Parasitism because they aren't creating energy of their own. They survive by drawing it from others. Unconscious because they don't even know they're doing it. And sadly, even though they don't mean harm, the result is still the same. You feel exhausted, lost, and unsettled every time you're near them. Now, I want you to picture this. You are a cool, flowing stream, and the other person is a dry, empty lake. At first you think, I can share my water with them. You give through listening, through compassion, through endless patience. But if, every day, you keep flowing into that same lake and never receive anything in return, eventually your stream will run dry. The Buddha once said, "No one can fill another's cup if their own is empty." I'm not telling you to abandon the people you love. I'm simply inviting you to look honestly at the nature of your connection. Are you truly helping, or are you being drained? Are you walking alongside them, or are you being dragged? Are you living, or just existing as someone's emotional fuel station? A woman once came to me and said, "I don't even know who I am anymore. All day, I carry the sadness of my husband, my friends, my mother. Everyone needs me, but I have no one to lean on." I asked her, "Have you ever allowed yourself to say, 'That's enough'?" She was silent for a long time. You know, saying, "That's enough," doesn't make you selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold. Stepping back from someone who lives in negativity doesn't mean you're abandoning them. It means you're protecting yourself, so you can return with a heart that's steady and strong. One of the most important lessons I've learned, after working with older adults for decades, is this. Some relationships, no matter how full of love, can become places where pain is passed around. Instead of being healed, unless we stay awake, and those of us who carry light like you must know when to shine and when to step back, so we're not burned by another person's fire, because you can't heal someone else if you're falling apart yourself. So ask yourself today, am I supporting, or am I slowly wearing down? Am I here out of love or out of guilt? Is that person taking responsibility for their pain, or are they handing it to me to carry? You can love someone without carrying their weight. You can listen without losing your center. And you can step back to give both of you the space to heal. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who's deeply wounded is not to let them keep wounding others. Even if you are the one they're wounding, protect your light, because you deserve to live in peace, not as a fire extinguisher for someone else's untamed flames. I want to invite you to sit down with me for a moment and think back to a situation like this. You had a good friend, or maybe a trusted family member, someone who truly stood by you during your hardest times. But then, someone else entered the picture. They seemed friendly, caring even, and they began saying things like, I don't want to talk bad about anyone, but you might want to be careful around that person. Or, I'm not sure what it is, but something about them just doesn't feel right. At first, you brushed it off, but then those little comments came again. Quiet, vague, not clear enough to confront, but just sharp enough to plant a seed of doubt. And slowly, you began to feel distance. Have you ever experienced something like that? A Buddhist practitioner once shared with me after a meditation session, "Venerable, I realized I lost a really good friend. Not because they did anything wrong, but because someone else kept whispering vague things into my ear. And one day, without meaning to, I just stopped trusting them. Now I miss that friend, but I don't even know how to go back." I sighed deeply, because this kind of thing happens more than we realize. Not everyone who plants doubt does it with obvious malice. Sometimes people do it out of jealousy, out of hurt, or simply because they're afraid of losing their role in your life. And often, they're very skilled at disguising it as concern. They'll say things like, "I'm not trying to interfere. Did you notice how that person looked at you? You probably don't know this, but it sounds like they care." But what they're really doing quietly, gradually, is cutting the cords between you and those who truly love you. I want you to imagine this. You are a tall, strong tree. All around you are other trees, some big, some small, intertwined through a shared root system underground. You all share sunlight, water, wind, but then a hidden hand begins digging quietly beneath the surface, snipping those roots one by one, not in a dramatic way, but just enough for you to feel like you're no longer being supported the way you used to. And you don't know why. That's how the people who plant doubt work. They don't use hammers. They use tiny needles pricking at your trust, little by little, day by day. The Buddha once said, "Beware of those who bring broken words, for they destroy trust with sleeves embroidered in beauty." In other words, it's often the words that sound kind, polite, even caring, that carry the deepest poison. And that poison doesn't kill you outright. It kills trust, the very thing that holds the deepest, healthiest relationships together. I've seen too many elders, in the later years of life, lonely, not because they had no one, but because they slowly pulled away from the people who loved them, simply because they listened to someone they trusted more. So I ask you today, are you letting someone shape the way you see others? Have you ever pulled away from a good person just because someone said, "I don't want to upset you, but..." If so, you may be walking away from a safe space you once built with your own heart. These doubt planters, they don't just take away your friends, they take away a piece of you, because your heart, once clear and open, now becomes clouded with suspicion. And the saddest part is, it's you who ends up retreating from your most beautiful connections, all because of whispers that were never backed by truth. I once told a friend, if someone always makes you question the people you care about, maybe it's time to start questioning them. Because someone who truly cares about you, they don't divide. They don't speak in riddles. They don't leave you confused after every conversation. They help you feel clearer, stronger, more grounded in the bonds that matter. Take a moment to reflect on your life. Who made you more suspicious of others? Who led you to slowly distance yourself from someone who once meant the world to you? And who, quietly, sits at the center of those invisible cracks you haven't noticed until now? You don't need to confront them. You just need to wake up. Because real love never stands between two people. Real love is a bridge, not a wall. So if someone is building a wall between you and someone you love, even if they're smiling, soft-spoken, or just worried about you, you need to light a quiet question in your heart. Because sometimes the person who seems to love you most is the one quietly isolating you, so they can become the only one left standing beside you. That's not love. That's control. That's manipulation. That's the strategy of darkness. I hope you stay awake. Awake enough to see who's truly walking beside you. Awake enough to listen to your own heart, which once knew so clearly who brought light and who dimmed it. And awake enough to return, gently, to the connections that were real. Because no one can take away your trust unless you give them permission. And today, you can choose to start again from a place of clarity and compassion. I want to invite you to sit with me for a moment and think back to a time when you were very clear with someone. You told them you needed space, you needed a break, or simply that you were busy and couldn't reply to messages or answer the phone right away. But they kept calling, kept texting, kept pushing into your space. They said things like, "I'm just asking one quick thing," or, "I know you're busy, but this is important." Even though you had set a boundary, they kept crossing it. Have you ever felt that way? An older Buddhist practitioner once told me during a morning meditation, "Venerable, I've got people in my family who always seem to have a reason to insert themselves into my life even when I've clearly said I need some time for myself. But they don't listen. They say, I'm only doing this because I care. But honestly, it feels more like pressure than love." I looked at her and gently said, "Someone who truly cares about you will honor your boundaries because they understand that your mind needs to breathe just as much as your lungs need oxygen. There's a kind of intrusion that doesn't shout. It doesn't storm in. It doesn't scream or control outright. It shows up as persistence that refuses to step back. You say, 'I need time.' They call you right after. You say, 'I'm busy.' They flood you with texts. Just real quick. You say, 'I don't feel like talking today.' They show up at your door saying, 'I know you need someone right now.' It sounds like concern. But if you really pay attention, you'll notice something. They're not actually listening. They're placing their need for connection above your need for peace. I want you to imagine this. You're a mountain. You have your own space, dense forests, drifting clouds, quiet stillness. But someone comes every single day. They knock on the cave door. They trek through the trees. They pitch a tent right against your cliff. They say, 'I'm just visiting.' But soon, you're no longer at peace. In Buddhism, we have a beautiful concept called samyama, self-restraint. It's not just about controlling your own actions. It's also about knowing when to stop so you don't invade someone else's inner world. Someone who can't respect your boundaries hasn't yet learned self-restraint. They don't see you as a living being who needs solitude. They see you as a source of emotional energy, something they're entitled to access anytime. And here's the tricky part. People like this often don't believe they're doing anything wrong. They think they're being helpful, showing they care, staying connected. But in reality, they're keeping you in a constant loop where you're always on, always responding, always available. I once worked with a retired man who told me he hadn't had a quiet morning in years. Every time he didn't answer his phone, a family member would call again and text, "I'm worried, why aren't you picking up?" And he said, "I feel like I'm not allowed to be silent." Are you living like that? Are you letting someone repeatedly violate your boundaries and then feel guilty for it? I'm not saying this so you'll blame them. I'm saying this so you'll start listening to yourself more. One sign that your spiritual boundary is being crossed is this. You feel anxious every time your phone rings. You feel like you don't have the right to say no. You feel drained just because someone wants to talk, wants to see you, wants you to show up, and you don't know how to escape. But here's something important. No one can cross your boundaries unless you leave the door open. Start small. A kind message saying you need time. A morning where you don't respond right away. An evening with your phone turned off, not out of anger, but out of respect for your own rest. The Buddha once said, "The awakened one knows when to step forward and when to step back." Someone who truly loves you will understand your silence. They won't make you feel guilty for wanting to be alone. They won't sigh or sulk or turn space into punishment. They'll step back with love and acceptance. And if someone keeps making you feel bad for needing your own space, ask yourself, am I living for me or for someone else's expectations? Am I being manipulated by sweet words that quietly overstep? You don't need to shout to be respected. You just need to be steady in your silence. And when you stand firm in that, those who stay, they're the ones who truly understand you. Those who leave, they only loved you when you were easy to access. So guard your space like a small temple in your heart. Because if everyone walks in without knocking, eventually the candle will go out. I want you to sit down with me for a moment and imagine this. Someone walks into your life. At first, they admire you deeply. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you handle adversity. They say you inspire them. They ask you thoughtful questions. They remember your words. They feel like a genuine companion, honest, close, sincere. But then, something shifts. After a while, you start to notice they begin to speak like you, write like you, dress like you, even repeat the very things you once shared with them without ever mentioning your name. And worse, they start telling others they're not the same anymore. Have you noticed they've changed? They're not as real as they used to be. Have you ever gone through something like that? An older Buddhist practitioner once told me, I helped a close friend build her career. I shared everything. How I connected with people, how I wrote, how I passed on positivity. At first, I was happy she wanted to learn. But over time, she began copying me entirely. And then she went around telling others I was the one copying others. It hurt because she used everything I gave her to turn around and diminish me. I sighed and said, not everyone who learns from you will feel gratitude. Some people learn just to replace you. Some imitate to take your place. And you know what the most bitter part is? People on the outside, they don't see any of it. They only see a close replica and begin to doubt the original. In Buddhism, we talk about true mind and false appearances. Your true mind is your genuine self, pure, grounded, radiant in its own light. But false appearances are copies. They're projections mimicking the outside to cover what's missing inside. And in life, there are many stylish imitators. They're skilled at copying the surface, but lack the soul, the substance, the foundation. You are someone who has lived deeply, earned your wisdom through hardship, learned through loss, healing, meditation. They only saw the results. And they try to take shortcuts by pretending to walk beside you, only to learn quickly and climb faster. I've met many like you people who carry their own light. They tend to fall into this trap because they don't expect betrayal. They live sincerely. They share openly. And that makes them easy targets for those who see them not as friends, but as ladders. A woman in her 52nd once told me, I never thought anyone would try to copy me just to steal my place. But now people say, That girl reminds me of you, except you've gone quiet lately. Maybe you're out of ideas. And it hurts, because I know my light is being used as someone else's mask. I looked at her and said softly, no real light can stay hidden forever. True light doesn't need to shout. It shines on its own, especially when imitation falls apart. You know, people who copy you are often people without their own source of light. They're drawn to something you have, a voice, a way of living, a presence that they lack inside. They imitate not to become more authentic, but to use your brightness to cover their own emptiness. They wear what you wear, say what you say, enter the same spaces you helped build. And then they invite comparison between you and the version they created from you. The Buddha once said, one who is true in spirit need not fear those who mimic form. That means, if you're rooted in your own truth, you don't need to fear being copied, but that doesn't mean it won't hurt. You may feel betrayed. You may feel drained. You may feel like pulling away from everything, but please don't pull away from yourself. Remember this, the original has a story. The copy only has technique. You have soul. They have tactics. You walk with experience. They walk by tracing your steps. You don't need to scream, hey, I'm the real one. You just need to live. To continue, and let time reveal the masks. Because what doesn't come from the heart eventually shows its cracks. People will start to see a shadow can never replace the light. And when that happens, you won't need to say a word. Just stand still in the truth that once inspired others to imitate you. Stay rooted. Keep shining. Keep being you. And let them keep performing. Because one day, when the performance grows exhausting, they'll fade. But you're not performing. You're just living. And living authentically is something no one can ever take from you. Have you ever noticed some people only show up when you're in pain? When you're in crisis, when your world is falling apart, when you don't know where to turn, they're there. They listen to your heartbreak, your struggles, your endless grief. They pat your back, say the right things, maybe even whisper gently, I'm always here for you. But then one day, you begin to heal. You start standing on your own 2 feet. You smile again, and slowly those people start to fade away. I once heard a Buddhist practitioner share this story. Master, there was a friend who was with me every step during my divorce. She'd call daily, visit weekly, always check in. But once I began healing, practicing yoga, meditating, starting a small business, she stopped reaching out. I'd invite her to hang out, and she'd always be busy. I'd post something joyful online, no reaction. But the moment I shared something sad there, she was asking questions again. I sat quietly for a moment, then asked, do you think she cared about you? Or about the broken version of you? The silence in her eyes was the answer. You see, not everyone has the heart to celebrate someone else's joy. Some people only feel close to you when you're broken. Because in your brokenness, you don't threaten them. You need them. You make them feel important. You reflect back their sense of worth. But the moment you begin to rise, to glow from within, your presence, even unintentionally, begins to make them feel small. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they were only comfortable with you when you were not okay. And now that you're okay, they don't know how to connect with you anymore. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha spoke of 4 types of friends. Those who are there in suffering, those who show up in joy, those who walk with you through both, and those who only show up for personal gain. He went on to say, the ones who stay when you grow, those are your true companions. A real friend isn't shaken by your positive change. Someone who truly loves you is happy when you thrive. But someone who is only familiar with your pain may not know how to handle your healing, because your light, without meaning to, exposes the shadows they're still avoiding in themselves. Have you ever had someone react like this? When you share that you're meditating now, or reading Buddhist teachings, or getting less angry, they smirk and say, "Oh wow, look who's suddenly so spiritual now." Or, "Don't pretend to be enlightened. I saw you snap last week." They don't see the effort. They don't see the practice. They only want to keep you in the same place, where you were fragile, dependent, easy to judge. I once met a woman in her 62nd, a longtime Buddhist. She shared her grief after losing her husband and child. She was depressed for 5 years. A friend would visit her often, tell stories to keep her from crying. But when she began meditating, listening to Dharma talks, gardening again, that same friend called her distant, said, "You're not the same anymore." And I told her gently, "Some people only know how to love the weak version of us, because when we grow strong, they don't know who to be around us anymore." Dear friend, you don't need to dim your light to make others comfortable. You don't need to fake your pain just to maintain a connection. You don't need to shrink yourself because someone else feels uneasy when you shine. Sometimes your healing becomes a mirror, and people will either evolve or walk away. And when they walk away, it says nothing about your worth. It simply reveals their limit. I want you to imagine this. Someone is lying in darkness, their eyes still closed. You enter with a small lamp in your hand. If they're ready, they'll welcome your light. But if they're not, they'll shield their eyes, complain it's too bright, and ask you to leave. And you must honor that. Keep walking. Keep shining. Not because you're proud, but because if you extinguish your light just to stay in that darkness, you both remain lost. The Buddha once said, "The awakened should not halt their steps just because others refuse to walk. So walk, shine, be who you are becoming, a version of you that's growing, healing, transforming, one step closer to peace." And if someone disappears when you find your joy, maybe they were never truly there for you in the first place. Have you ever shared something joyful, only to be met with silence? Not because the other person was busy, not because they didn't hear you, but because they just didn't say anything. No smile, no congratulations, no reaction at all. Just silence. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because when someone truly loves you, their first instinct when they hear your good news is joy, genuine happiness, that light in their eyes that says, "I'm so glad you made it. I'm happy you're finding peace." But when they go quiet, when they change the subject, when they look away from the light you've just found, that silence is not accidental. It's not forgetfulness. It's a quiet kind of rejection, unspoken, but sharp. It's the kind of silence that makes you question yourself. Did I overshare? Am I making them jealous? Did I do something wrong? Have you ever felt that? A Buddhist woman once told me, "Master, I had a best friend for over 10 years. When I got divorced, she was there. She called, she cried with me, brought food, held my hand. But 3 years later, when I told her I'd found peace, started a new job, and met someone new, she just said, 'Oh,' and changed the subject. Then she whispered through tears. I don't blame her, but I realized she's no longer happy when I'm happy. You know, we often assume that people who stay by our side in sorrow must be good people. But not everyone is willing to walk beside us when we start to shine. Because sometimes your light reveals the shadows in them. And not everyone is ready to face that. Some people can't celebrate another person's happiness because they've never truly touched happiness themselves. They've lived in their own pain so long that the only comfort they feel is when others are hurting too. So when you finally rise out of your darkness, they don't know where they belong in your life anymore. I once met an older man in his 72nd. He had survived war, poverty, and deep loss. After 40 years of hard work, he finally built a small home of his own. His neighbors said nothing, not a word of congratulations. But the moment he made a small mistake, just one, they said, well, new house or not, he's still the same guy. You see, some people can't stand your rise, but they'll show up real fast when you fall. The Buddha once said, a good person rejoices in the goodness of others. A wise one feels joy for the merit of others, as if it were their own. He called this mudita sympathetic joy. It's one of the foundations of loving kindness and the antidote to jealousy and comparison. If someone can't feel happy for you when you're doing well, they're not a companion. They're someone who pulls you back into your old shadow, not through words, but through a silence that makes you doubt your right to shine. And I want you to imagine this. You're a seedling, just breaking through the earth after a long, dark season. Your first green sprout reaches toward the Sunday. Next to you stands an older tree drying out, withering. If that tree truly cared, it would shade you gently, help you grow. But if it can't stand the fact that you're getting taller, it will do whatever it can to keep you from growing past it. And in that moment, you have to choose. Keep rising, or shrink yourself, just to stay beside a tree that's forgotten how to grow. I know, being rejected through silence is one of the hardest things to face, because there are no words, no goodbye, no closure, just a slow shrinking of your spirit. But please don't let that silence steal your joy. The Buddha didn't teach us to live for applause. He taught us to live in truth and let go of whatever no longer aligns with the path of light, even if that means letting go of someone who once felt like home. Remember this: a true friend is someone who can cry with you when you're broken and laugh with you when you're healing, not someone who only shows up when you're weak and disappears the moment you're strong. So if today someone goes quiet when you share your joy, don't be sad. See it for what it is, a quiet signal that you've moved a little farther along your path, and that it's time to keep walking, to keep growing, to keep seeking the ones who can walk with you not just in the dark, but in the light. Have you ever walked away from a conversation or a meeting with someone and felt strangely tired? Not angry, not upset, but just off. Like something inside you was foggy. Like you couldn't quite find yourself again afterward. They didn't yell. You didn't argue. Nothing obvious happened. And yet, on the drive home, or in the quiet that follows, you feel lost. Like you're no longer standing on your own ground. If you've ever felt that way, you may have been under someone's influence without even realizing it. Let me offer you an image. You are a clear, still stream. Every time you interact with someone, it's like a single drop falls into that water. Some drops make the water brighter. Some make it murkier. And some no color, no smell, don't seem like much at all. Yet, after each encounter, your clarity quietly fades. A Buddhist woman once came to me and shared something so ordinary, yet so true. She said, "Master, I have a cousin. She's not rude. She doesn't say anything harsh. But every time I talk to her afterward, I feel lost. The things I used to be excited about suddenly seem pointless. I start to feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm fading into the background, like I'm living on someone else's rhythm, not mine. I listened for a while. Then I asked her gently, "Have you ever felt like you needed permission just to live your own life?" She looked at me for a long time, then nodded and cried. You see, manipulation isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in the form of shouting or control. Some people never raise their voice and still manage to shrink your sense of self. They plant doubt with a smile. They offer advice that leaves you second guessing. They laugh, but in a way that makes you feel small. And then slowly you start to change, not because you're growing, but because you're shrinking yourself to fit their distorted expectations. So let me say this clearly. If you leave an interaction feeling drained, confused, or like you've lost touch with who you are, that is not a healthy connection. The Buddha once taught, you become who you spend time with. This isn't just social advice. It's spiritual truth. Because we are beings of mind and energy, and the mind is deeply affected by the people we trust, love, and open up to. I once met an elderly man, nearly 80 years old. He told me, "Master, when I was younger, I always gave in to others, thinking it kept the peace. But now that I'm old, I don't know who I really am anymore. I don't know what I like or want because I've lived so long by my wife's words, my children's expectations, my neighbor's opinions. Sometimes, the greatest loss in life isn't money. It's not status. It's losing yourself, bit by bit, without even realizing it." Someone once asked me, "How do I know if someone is pulling me away from myself?" I offered them this simple practice. Look at how you feel after you've seen them. If you feel light, clear, inspired, they're lifting you up. But if you feel drained, self-doubting, like you've been pulled off your path, you need to be cautious. And I know, sometimes, the person doing this isn't a stranger. It might be a close friend. It might be family. It might even be someone who once held a deep place in your heart. But dear one, no one is more important than your mental and spiritual well-being. You don't have to cut people off or blame them, but you do need to return to yourself, to your voice, to your truth, to the path that feels aligned with who you really are before it got blurred by someone else's lens. In our meditation practice, we do something very simple. After any conversation, sit quietly for a moment. Close your eyes and ask yourself, do I still feel whole? Am I still living by what I know to be true? If the answer is no, don't rush to accuse anyone, but don't ignore that feeling either. Because your soul always knows when you've started to drift from yourself. There's something beautiful, the Buddha said. Be a lamp unto yourself. No one can light the path for you forever. And no one, no matter how much they say they love you, has the right to dim your light. So if today you feel like you've lost touch with who you are, stop, breathe, come back. Come back to that quiet voice within you, the one that asks for nothing but truth. Because a meaningful life doesn't begin by pleasing others. It begins by being honest with yourself. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, has there ever been someone in your life who treated you kindly, but over time, that kindness started to feel like a burden, like an invisible debt, one you didn't feel free to refuse, couldn't walk away from, and didn't dare be fully yourself around? A Buddhist once came to me in tears and asked, "Why am I so exhausted around someone who used to be so good to me? Every time I try to set a boundary, they bring up all the things they did for me like I'm some kind of ungrateful person." I looked at her and said, That's no longer kindness. That's a spiritual transaction. And you've been trapped in a debt with no due date. Have you ever felt that way? No one forces you. There's no written contract. But deep inside, you carry this weight, not of money, but of emotion. And that weight, it keeps you from being free, from being you. I once spoke with a man in his 72nd who told me something that stayed with me. He said, "When I was young, someone helped me a lot. He was generous. But over the years, I realized I didn't feel free to live differently from him. Every time I made a choice for myself, he'd say, 'After all I did for you, how could you forget?'" He sighed deeply. "I'm grateful. But the more grateful I became, the smaller I felt. I stopped saying what I really thought. I stopped growing. I stopped moving forward." You see, when someone keeps reminding you of their past kindness as a way to hold you in place, that's no longer compassion. That's control disguised in affection. And that kind of control may not come from a cruel heart, but it creates a dangerous space where guilt keeps you stuck. In Buddhist teachings, there's a powerful truth. Do good without expecting anything in return. Give without clinging to the credit. Why? Because when kindness comes with conditions, it ceases to be pure. It becomes a subtle form of control, planting karmic seeds of entanglement. And if you find yourself in a relationship where every time you seek your freedom, the other person says, "But remember what I did for you," then you're caught in emotional manipulation wrapped in the language of loyalty. Now, I'm not saying you should turn your back on those who once helped you, but I am saying, learn to tell the difference. Gratitude is sacred, but so is spiritual freedom. If someone once lifted you up, then yes, honor that in your heart. But if they're using their past goodness to control your present life, then it's time to stand up and say, "I'm grateful, but I still have the right to live in truth, not out of emotional debt." Someone who truly loves you won't hold your past like a leash. They'll give then release. They'll help then step back. They won't ask you to stay just because they once gave you something, because they understand. Only when you are free can you truly grow. Only when love is unbound can it be real. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "A person with gratitude is rare, but rarer still is the one who is grateful without being trapped in emotional bondage." I want you to imagine something. A bird is flying, but every time it tries to soar higher, a hand pulls it down, whispering, "Don't forget I gave you those wings." Over time, the bird stops trying, not because it doesn't want to fly, but because it's afraid of being called ungrateful. I've met many people over 50 who've said to me, "I live this way because someone once helped me." And when I look into their eyes, I see a quiet sorrow, as if they've spent years living someone else's life, with a soul held hostage by a spiritual debt. If that's you, if you're caught in such a relationship, allow me to tell you this: you do not have to live in repayment, if that repayment is stealing your peace of mind. Gratitude doesn't mean surrendering your voice. To be truly grateful is to keep living with kindness, without letting someone else's past goodness stop you from speaking your truth, from walking the right path, from being yourself. You have every right to say, "I honor what you did for me, but this path, I must walk it with my own steps, not because I've forgotten you, but because I don't want to forget myself." And if someone genuinely cares about you, they will understand. They will smile, and they will let you fly with the wings that now belong to you. I want to share something with you, something very real, very human, and honestly, quite painful if we're not awake to it. I once asked a middle-aged Buddhist practitioner, "What's the one thing that has made you give up the most in life?" He paused for a moment and said, It's not failure, Bhante. It's the voices of others that made me doubt myself. Have you ever experienced something like that? When you begin to believe in something, maybe a gentle dream, a wholesome desire, or even just a small spark of an idea, someone shows up, not to support you, but to dim your light with a smirk, a doubtful glance, or a few careless words that hit harder than we realize. You're being unrealistic. Wake up, life doesn't work that way. You're just chasing fantasies. And at first, it might sound like they're helping you be more practical. But in truth, it's like a cold wind blowing on the little flame in your heart until it flickers and quietly dies. I want you to imagine this. You're walking down a dark path with a small oil lamp in your hand. Each step you take adds a drop of hope to that light. But then, someone walks by, blows on it gently, and says, "Your light, it's not realistic. What's the point?" And if you're not steady, you'll end up blowing it out yourself. I've met so many people, especially those in their 42nd or 52nd, who once had beautiful dreams. Nothing grand. Just a wish to learn meditation, to start a small art class for children, to grow organic vegetables, to write their life story, or simply to slow down and be kinder to themselves. But they gave up because the people around them couldn't understand. And their reaction was always the same. They made them feel wrong for simply beginning to change. Here's the irony. Most of the time, they didn't do it out of hate. They did it because your inner light made them uncomfortable. Because you dared to step out of a darkness they've long gotten used to. You dared to dream when they stopped dreaming a long time ago. You dared to believe when they've been disappointed too many times. So your light, it unsettles them. The Buddha once said, "The wise act out of wisdom, the ignorant act out of fear." And that's the painful truth. Many people live out of fear. So when they see someone living out of faith, it threatens them. And instead of healing their fear, they try to extinguish your light. I once met a woman in her 62nd who, after retiring, wanted to teach free meditation classes at a public park. She told me with such sincerity, "Bhante, I just want people to have one quiet moment each week, nothing big." But when she shared this with her family, they laughed. "Are you serious? Who's going to sit and meditate in a park with you?" And just like that, she went silent. She gave up. She told me, with tears in her eyes, "It's not that I'm afraid of failing. It's that I felt so alone in my own light." Do you see it? Sometimes people don't stop you directly. All they do is plant a little seed of doubt, and suddenly you give up not because you were wrong, but because you thought you were wrong. So if today you have a dream, even a small one, if you carry within you a hope to live with kindness, to live with truth, to live in alignment with your inner light, please don't extinguish it. Just because someone else can't see what you see, your light belongs to you. No one has the right to call it unrealistic. Sometimes you will have to walk alone. But if that walk is led by a clear, mindful heart, it will be a beautiful one. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "By oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone. By oneself is one purified." Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. Light or darkness begins within our own mind. And if someone tries to make you doubt the goodness you hold, pause, reflect. Are they speaking truth? Or are they projecting their own fear onto you? You don't need to rebel. You don't need to argue. You just need to quietly keep your flame. And keep walking, Because one person's quiet light can soften an entire darkness. There's a quiet miracle I believe all of us have touched at some point. That moment when we come home to ourselves, when we no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone, when we live truthfully, think clearly, and rest in the peace of our own inner light. So if you're holding on to a small dream, a bit of faith that the world seems to be shaking, I hope you don't let go, because that little flame might just be the lighthouse for someone else, someone lost in the night of doubt and fatigue. In Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful truth. Each of us holds the Buddha nature, the potential to awaken, to understand, and to live with compassion. Every time you dare to believe in something good, you are watering the seeds of awakening in your heart. Thank you for walking with me through this reflection. If something in today's message touched your heart, I invite you to help share this light. Please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds. Click the like button to help spread these teachings. Share this video with someone you think needs a little light. And leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear what's stirring in your heart. Because maybe, just maybe, your words are exactly what someone else needs to hear today.